track hard. We take it, we be optimistic, and we gonna win games, bro. All right, 1, 2, 3.
All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. It's a Draft on Tap Wednesday, and my guest today from WalterFootball.com is Charlie Campbell. Charlie, how are you?
I'm great. How you doing, Doug?
I'm doing great, man. Busy time of year, so I appreciate a little time. Your first time on the podcast, so we always like to get to know folk a little bit. It feels like you've been with Walter Football for a long time. How did you get started there?
Well, I out of college did a bunch of different internships, and one of them was with a football agent named Brian Harlan, who at the time had a lot of coaches, guys like Dave Wannstedt, Mike Singletary. He did Urban Meyer's first contract with Florida. So I interned with him, got some experience with some pro sports teams. Then I landed a beat writer job covering the Bucks and did that for 3.5 years in Tampa Bay. And then after 3.5 years, made the switch to Walter Football, and I've been with Walt since 2011. So we've had a good long run here going. So definitely very blessed and fortunate to live a dream and cover the NFL draft for a living.
It's an incredible stretch there, Walter Football. What do you think has been the key? You know, it's hard. It's easy, I guess, to catch on. It's hard to stay there, right? And it feels like you guys have been doing it at a high level for a long time. What do you think the key is for that?
For me, it's all about using my ears more than my mouth. And I lean on people that know more than I do. So I'm really fortunate that I have a good network of team sources and guys in the scouting community who help me out. So I listen to them because, as I tell readers all the time, my opinion, people get mad if I have one guy rated too low or whatever from their favorite school or team. And I tell them all the time, my opinion's irrelevant. It does not matter. I'm just trying to forecast where I think teams are valuing guys, because that's what really matters to me to project an accurate mock draft or position ranking or anything like that, is knowing how teams value players. So I work hard to talk with them and learn from them and hear where they like guys. And of course, it varies from team to team, but overall, that's really worked well. And I don't talk to agents at all because they will give you a lot of misleading information. And it's not, I don't blame them. They're advocating for their clients, which, they have to do. I don't hold it against them, but you have to, consider that when you hear the information. So I talk almost exclusively to just team people, listen where they're evaluating guys, and that's resulted in us having excellent accuracy in our mock drafts. And that's really what gets me excited. I get excited when I get good inside information to pass it on to readers, because I know that feeling as a fan when you get to hear something that is kind of behind the curtain and you get a glimpse of the future and where teams like guys. I loved reading that as a fan growing up. And so that's what I strive to do and strive to deliver now.
It's been really cool the last couple of years, I think, to see how much transparency there's been. I guess the more and more that folks are willing to do podcasts and players are talking. How do you kind of fix the line there on what players have to say and then the guys that are traditional journalists trying to get the scoops?
For me, focusing on the draft, it doesn't have a big impact because players are generally kind of kept out of the draft process. Teams will. Players already in the NFL that you have some instances where like say the Bengals talking with Joe Burrow about Jamar Chase when he was in that draft class, that kind of thing, of course, happens where you have teammates and they might ask their player, how is this guy in the locker room? Is he a good worker, good teammate? Those kinds of things. So you have some of that, but for the most part, the players are off doing their own thing in the spring. They're very limited in how much they can be at the team facility in these early months of the year. And then come April, the off-season program starts more, but they're still not in the draft meetings and all that. So the secrecy of the draft process remains. And so for me, it hasn't changed too much with the emergence of the player podcasts.
How much how much were your mock change after the free agency period?
It's going to have a big impact. And this year, I think, especially with so many teams in the quarterback market, it's going to have a big impact on the mock draft come, late in the top 10 and early in the teens, because it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with, say, Atlanta, Denver, Las Vegas for their quarterback spots. And if one of the top three teams, I don't think it's likely, but if the Bears or Washington or New England were to get a veteran quarterback in free agency and now that pick is open to being traded down, that would be a huge change. But I don't anticipate that, but, it's theoretically possible. So, but I do think you'll see a lot of teams filling needs. So right now I might have a team that's really targeting a edge rusher or cornerback, and maybe they go out and make a big signing there. And so now kind of opens up options for them to take a different position to help upgrade their roster.
All right, let's get into a little bit of this mock draft that you've got here. Caleb Williams feels like the guy at one. It feels like he's been the guy at one, no matter who was selecting it for a couple of years. You expect it will remain this way through the draft?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that the Bears want to do right by Justin Fields and get a trade for him sooner rather than later. And it makes sense for all parties as well, because from the Bears' perspective, the longer they hold on to Justin Fields, that could really reduce what they get back in a trade. I mean, you want multiple teams in the market, bidding against each other to get the biggest package. So if you think back to a few years ago when Deshaun Watson went to the Browns, Baker Mayfield was kind of in limbo for quite a while, and that led to the value going down, and they only end up getting a 5th-round pick for him from Carolina. So for the Bears' perspective, it makes sense to do it sooner, and same with Fields. So I think that's where this is headed.
What do you think his trade value looks like?
I think it's
because you talked about a bidding war, but it feels like it's Atlanta or Pittsburgh. Maybe I'm wrong there.
Yeah, that it's a great point, Doug, because I think they would want it to be a bidding war, but it could be kind of underneath things where maybe there's some teams involved we aren't anticipating. But I agree with you that on the surface, it doesn't look like there's a huge amount of teams, in the trade market. Not like Deshaun Watson when you had Cleveland and Atlanta and Carolina and potentially Miami before Tua kind of got straightened out. There was all these teams talked about, but and I have some skepticism on the Falcons because their GM Terry Fontenot, their front office, passed on Fields in 2011, and I don't think you've seen him progress enough as a pocket passer to change their mind. I mean, it's possible, but or maybe they think he could be the best option available because picking at 8, they're unlikely to get one of the top 3. But still, the problem is Fields is going to be due another contract here soon. So that makes it even more complicated because who's ever trading for him needs to be willing to pay him and that next contract, because you don't want to give up a quality pick for a player that's just a rental. That's just not good for your long-term roster management. So I think the value could be like a 2nd or 3rd round pick and then maybe a conditional pick for next year. That's kind of like the Aaron Rodgers trade, whether it's playing time or wins or a contract extension. Those kind of factors, come into whether it's another second round pick or a third round pick or something like that.
I wonder, we talk about these contracts and they're humongous. You're starting to see them float around about the new deals. I wonder what these rookie contracts, like for a guy, say a Justin Fields, where not only do you get the 4 years, you get the fifth year option. I wonder how many we'll see start franchising tags. You could get a guy for 5, 6, 7 years, right? And then not have to worry about quite as much as like what's going on with Tua, where it's looking like it's 5 for 220 or something like that. It's wild.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's these quarterback contracts are just getting out of this world, the amount of money per season. And then you consider the cap going up helps, but you still have, if you're a team that has $60 million in one player, I mean, that's a huge amount of your cap is just tied up right there. So these contracts are going to get more problematic. So, but at the same time, there's going to be teams willing to pay them because there's so many teams that are just in dire straits and need a quarterback. So whether it's the teams picking in the top 3, and then you have Atlanta and Denver and the Raiders, they're between 8 and 13. Then in before long, the Jets will be back into it. Given the age of Aaron Rodgers, you're going to have, potentially other young quarterbacks not pan out. Seattle next year could be back in it. It's a revolving door. So you're always going to have teams willing to pay that big deal for an established quality quarterback.
In this mock here, you have Jaden Daniels for the Commanders. It feels like in the end it will either be him or May. I know you said that you do your mocks based on things that you're hearing. Do you personally, first question is, do you have a preference of the two personally?
Well, I personally kind of prefer Drake May, but it's not as big of a consensus as with teams as the media has portrayed. I do know teams that like Drake May and Jaden Daniels more than Caleb Williams, and I know teams that like Caleb the most. So it's not as cut and dry, and I think it is fluid. I do, we've seen it before where during the draft process, in the pre-draft visits and meetings, that the order of the quarterbacks kind of gets flipped around. And think back to 2018, Baker Mayfield was not being projected number 1 overall at this time. You had guys like Sam Darnold and Josh Allen who were kind of generally, especially Darnold, projected to go 1 overall. So, it can change in the process, but right now I think it's really too early for me to say who Washington definitely prefers. But looking at the history of Cliff Kingsbury, in the general trend of the league in terms of what mobile quarterbacks can do, I'm inclined to go with Jaden Daniels right now, but that definitely could change here in the weeks to come.
It's interesting for Washington because it's a brand new everything. So
Right,
things that we used to
exactly.
think we know, we have to remind ourselves if we don't know anything, particularly as
Right,
a case about what Peters may like to do here.
right. And and coming, you could have they might prefer a pocket passer. Peters coming from San Francisco with Purdy, and before that Garoppolo, and now their other hire coming in from Detroit with a pocket passer and Jared Goff. So maybe they'd be more comfortable with a guy like May, who I've compared to Goff a lot. I think he's a more athletic version of Goff. And in some ways, you could argue that that's the safest one of these 3 guys, for translating to the NFL in terms of a guy that can read coverage and is a big pocket passer with some athleticism, but not a, crazy highlight reel runner, but a runner who can help you pick up a few third and manageables with his feet when everything's covered downfield.
How many quarterbacks do you think end up going in the first round this year, Charlie?
Well, it's really tough to say pre-free agency.
Sure.
I think at least 4. I think that we'll end up with the top 3, and then I think J.J. McCarthy will go in the first round, and then I think Bo Nix could be on the bubble, but that's going to depend a lot on what happens in free agency. So I think that he has a shot, but I think it might not be likely, but it's possible.
Where are you at on Bo Nix? I talk to people about Bo all the time. If you look at the Auburn tape, it's yikes. If you look at the Oregon tape, he looks incredible. The system in Oregon, although I think more pro-ready, it was very friendly for the quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. I think that you have to weigh that, but I do think he got a lot better as he gained experience, and I do think the Auburn situation would be tough for a lot of players, and with the changing coaching staffs and kind of the decline of the talent around the quarterback there from where they had been. But I think with Bo Nix, you have a lot of things that you like in terms of accuracy and being a smart quarterback, good decision maker, good fit in a West Coast offense to get the ball out, throw it to the correct receiver, and have good ball security. And obviously he can make some things happen with his feet and help as a runner. But he is missing a special arm talent. His arm looks to be, pretty much average at best. There's not a Josh Allen howitzer there, and there's not a power arm with him. So if that makes him more kind of specific to schemes, some schemes they don't worry about that. They don't need a guy to have a big gun. Other teams want that quarterback that can really spin it and push the ball vertically and throw in some fastballs into tight windows. So it's going to be, I think, very scheme specific with Bo.
You have Graham Barton from Duke at pick 36 for the Commanders. I like him. In Washington, Ron Rivera talked about position flex so much that I think the fan base will be scared a little bit about the cleanup on Barton, simply because he played tackle at Duke. I think the league sees him as guard. And then I've seen some people, such as yourself, say maybe he's an elite center prospect. Where do you see Graham Barton actually fitting?
Yeah, I think on the interior would be his best fit, and he did play center as a freshman. So there is tape of him playing center and doing well on the inside there. But I think given the arm length and just his overall play, moving to the inside would be where he would max out and be at his best. But I do think he has the flexibility to play tackle, guard, or center. So if you're in a game, there's injuries, and he's a smart kid, he'd be flexible enough where you could move him to kind of adjust the front five and try and withstand an injury or two at a moment's notice. But I do think he could be a real beast as a center in the NFL and a very good guard. And I think he's a safe pick. I would be surprised if he didn't turn into just a solid pro starter. It would really surprise me if he busted. So I think in the top of the second round, you're getting just a solid starter to help build up that line and protect your young quarterback.
And the Commanders drafted Ricky Stromberg last year at center. Do you recall how you liked him coming out of Arkansas?
I thought he was a solid player that had starting potential. So I think that with him, I thought he could play guard as well. So I think with him and Barton, you could just kind of figure out which one is kind of as a pair, how do they work the best together in terms of who plays guard and who plays center, and they both have that kind of flexibility.
Last one, you got Darius Robinson from Missouri as the Commander's second pick at 40. Maybe one of the biggest draft risers, it feels like, at the moment. You've got him there now. I would freak out if we ended up with him at that pick. Where do you think by the time is the fan or NFL fans getting too excited about Robinson too fast? Where do you think he realistically ends up going, range wise?
Yeah, I do think that the one thing the Senior Bowl hype machine can get going on guys at times, and from the Mobile week, I remember Braxton Miller getting a big hype push, and some people mocking him in the first round, and he ended up being a third-round pick. And defensive tackle Carl Davis from Iowa having a big Senior Bowl hype run that had him going in the first, and he ended up going in the second. I do think Darius Robinson will be a better pro than those guys. But I do think there's a bit of a Senior Bowl hype with him just from talking with teams. I think they have him more as an early second-round pick, but he does have a chance to sneak into late one, especially if he works out well and times fast, because that's the one thing that teams kind of feel is lacking. They like the strength. They love the motor. He's very physical. He can get off blocks, toss linemen off of him, but he lacks a little juice off the ball. Not the fastest guy around the edge, and that's not to be unexpected when he's so big and strong. I mean, he's about 6'5", 285, so he's not a 260-pound edge rusher, or so you don't expect him to have that kind of freakish speed. If he did, he'd be number one. He'd be a top 5 pick. So
Right.
like a Mario Williams or a Clowney. So yeah, I definitely think he could be a really good football player and a really good solid starter there for Washington. So I think he's in that range. If he works out well, maybe he sneaks late in the first. But the other thing, where they're picking at 36 and 40, they definitely could move back into the first. They have.
I've talked about that.
Yeah, they definitely have that potential. Pick 68, if they were willing to give that up, would definitely let them move back into the first round from pick 36. So that if they really like an edge rusher there or an offensive tackle slides that they really like, they're in striking distance to really come away with 2 first rounders.
How far does where do you think the Mims range is from Georgia? Talk about sneaking.
That's a great question. Yeah, because I love Mims. He's one of my favorite players in the draft. Just a physical beast and a rare talent. But he only started 8 games in college, got injured twice last year. So the lack of experience is a little concerning, considering you could take a tackle that's played more and looks kind of has a more volume of tape to study that you feel is a safer pick. But I think Mims's range right now would probably be from, say, mid first round, 15, 16 to about 30, somewhere in there, depending on how the medical evaluation goes with teams and how he does in the interviews. I think he'll crush the workout. I think he's going to kill it on Sunday here at the combine, and I think he'll do well at the pro day as well, and be a star of the workout part of the draft process. So I would definitely think that'll help him. So wouldn't shock me if he ends up being in that 15 to 30 range right now, and after the workouts, maybe it's more like 15 to 25 or so, something like that.
Charlie, this has been great, man. I really appreciate you being so generous with your time in such a busy time of the year. How many renditions of the mock draft do you end up doing before the draft? Before April.
I kind of lose track because I update it every week. So
Okay.
every Monday morning, up until draft week, I'll have a new one going up. And if there's, say, like a big trade, like a few years ago, or last year, where Carolina moved into number one, I'll do an emergency one right away. So if there's a big trade happens, I'll do it right away. But otherwise, every Monday, I post a new update. And then during draft week, every day, I have an update going up before the final one. And it ends up being 7 rounds by the end of it. Right now, I'm at 3 rounds, and in the next few weeks, it'll expand to 4, and then just keep growing.
And you got not just on the website, you guys are doing it on the YouTube channel too, right?
Yeah, we do an occasional 3-man mock draft video, and we did one last night. So if you want to check that out, that'd be great. But we have a Walter Football channel on YouTube as well. So, but yeah, my weekly mock draft goes up every Monday morning.
Charlie, thank you, but I appreciate this.
Thank you, Doug. Great talking with you.
Yep.